Hello all, welcome to our YouTube channel Indian Anatomist. In today's video, we are going to discuss about the foraminas present in the base of skull. This is the picture of base of skull, that is norma basalis. Since there are numerous foramina in the base of skull, we are going to divide the skull into three distinct regions: anterior, middle and posterior, so that it makes our study easier. The anterior region is located between the alveolar arch in front and posterior edge of the hard palate behind. Next, the middle region. A transverse imaginary line that passes through the anterior margin of the foramen magnum, which is the largest foramen present in the base of skull, divides the middle and posterior regions. This picture shows the three regions: anterior, middle and posterior region, and the lines of demarcation we can observe. Now, coming to the foraminas in the anterior region of norma basalis. In the norma basalis, the first foramina we are going to see is incisive canal. It is otherwise also called as anterior palatine or nasopalatine canal, which is situated in the hard palate behind the maxillary incisor teeth. Incisive canal is Y-shaped, whose stem opens into a shallow depression called incisive fossa, which is situated behind the maxillary incisor teeth. Each limb of Y opens on either side of the nasal septum of the nasal cavity. The incisive canal transmits two structures: the nasopalatine nerve, which descends from the nasal cavity into the oral cavity, and the greater palatine artery that ascends into the nasal cavity from oral cavity. Next foramen, the greater palatine foramen. These are a paired foramen opening in the posterolateral border of the hard palate and is situated medial to third molar tooth or between the second and third molar teeth of upper jaw. The foramen continues upwards as greater palatine canal or the pterygopalatine canal. The structures transmitted are greater palatine vessels and anterior palatine nerve. The next foramen is lesser palatine foramen. Usually these are two in number on each side. These are accessory foramen to the greater palatine foramen, which is situated behind to it. In this picture, we can see the tip of the arrow showing the foraminas. These are situated on the base of the skull in the pyramidal process of palatine bone, that is, posteromedial to the third molar tooth. The structures transmitting are the lesser palatine vessels, middle and posterior palatine nerves. The blue arrow shows the greater palatine foramen, whereas the red color arrow marks the lesser palatine foramen. Coming to the foraminas present in the middle region of the norma basalis. The middle region of the norma basalis is divided into a median and lateral portions. First, we'll see about the median portion of the middle region of norma basalis. In this part, the first foramen or canal we are going to see is the palatovaginal canal. It is also called as pharyngeal canal. It connects the pterygopalatine fossa with nasopharynx. It is situated between the vaginal process of medial pterygoid plate of sphenoid bone and sphenoid process of palatine bone. It transmits two structures: the pharyngeal branch of the maxillary nerve and pharyngeal branch of third part of the maxillary artery. Next is the omerovaginal canal. These are small paired foramina situated one on either side of the palatovaginal canal. It is present between the ala of Omer and vaginal process of medial pterygoid plate of sphenoid bone. The palatovaginal canal is shown in the light blue color arrow mark. The omerovaginal canal transmits again two structures: the pharyngeal nerve from pterygopalatine ganglion and pharyngeal branch of the third part of maxillary artery. Coming to the foraminas present in the middle region of norma basalis. The first foramen is foramen ovale. It is an oval-shaped foramen as the name applies, and paired foramina situated in the basilar part of greater wing of sphenoid bone. Superiorly, the foramen ovale communicates with middle cranial fossa and inferiorly with infratemporal fossa. The structures passing through foramen ovale can be remembered by a mnemonic male or meal. The structures transmitted through the foramen ovale are mandibular nerve, accessory meningeal artery, lesser petrosal nerve, and sphenoidal emissary vein. Occasionally, there may be foraminas present anterior or posterior to the foramen ovale. They are the sphenoidal emissary foramen or the foramen of Vesalius. It's a tiny foramen occasionally situated in front of foramen ovale. If present, it transmits the sphenoidal emissary vein, which communicates the infratemporal fossa and middle cranial fossa. The incidence of foramen Vesalius is about 17% of the skulls and more on right side. The another foramen is Canaliculus innominatus or foramen of Arnold or petrosal foramen. It is also a tiny foramen occasionally situated behind the foramen ovale. If present, it transmits the lesser petrosal nerve. The incidence of this foramen is more or less same that of the foramen of Vesalius. Usually, the sphenoidal emissary vein and the lesser petrosal nerve are transmitted through the foramen ovale. The next foramen is foramen spinosum. These are small paired foramen situated in the basilar part of greater wing of sphenoid bone, just behind and lateral to the foramen ovale. These are closely related to the spine of the sphenoid bone. Hence, it is known as foramen spinosum. Superiorly, it communicates with middle cranial fossa and inferiorly with infratemporal fossa. The foramen spinosum transmits three structures. First, the nervus spinosus or meningeal branch of mandibular nerve. Second, middle meningeal artery. And third, the middle meningeal vein. In this picture, we can see the spine of sphenoid bone shown by the blue color arrow and the foramen spinosum with the red color arrow mark. Next is the carotid canal. It is also a paired foramen situated in the petrous part of temporal bone, which is present between the foramen spinosum and jugular foramen. It has two openings, inferior or external or carotid opening, which is present in front of the jugular foramen, and superior or internal or petrous opening situated lateral to the foramen lacerum, which is in the middle cranial fossa. The carotid canal is marked by the blue color ring. Carotid canal transmits the internal carotid artery, internal carotid venous plexus, and sympathetic plexus around the internal carotid artery. Next is foramen lacerum. These are paired lacerated foramen situated on the basilar part of occipital and body of sphenoid bones medially and apex of petrous part of the temporal bone laterally. In living, the foramen is covered by cartilage inferiorly, so no structures passing through this foramen, but upper part of this foramen is traversed by the following structures. 1. The internal carotid artery. 2. The formation of nerve of the pterygoid canal by the union of greater and deep petrosal nerves. The greater petrosal nerve is parasympathetic, while the deep petrosal nerve is sympathetic. 3. The artery of pterygoid canal, which accompanies the nerve of pterygoid canal. Coming to the last foramen in the base of skull is the petrotympanic or Glaserian fissure. This is a slit-like foramen, mostly called as fissure, situated in the mandibular fossa of temporal bone, in the infratemporal fossa. The fissure divides the fossa into articular tubercle anteriorly and tympanic plate of temporal bone posteriorly. The structures passing through are the cauda tympanae nerve, which is a branch of facial nerve that runs into the infratemporal fossa and joins the lingual nerve, which is a branch of mandibular division of trigeminal nerve. Now coming to the foraminas in the posterior region of norma basalis. We can see the part of norma basalis. Now we'll see the foraminas present in the posterior region of norma basalis. The first foramen we are going to see is foramen magnum. As the name assigns, this foramen is the largest and oval-shaped median foramen in the skull, which is seen both in skull base and also in the cranial cavity. Superiorly, it communicates with posterior cranial fossa and inferiorly with the neck, especially the vertebral canal. Usually it is narrower in front and wider behind. It is overlapped on each side by the occipital condyles. The occipital condyles are marked as OC, one on either side of the foramen magnum in the picture. Now coming to the structures transmitting through the foramen magnum. The narrow anterior part transmits the apical ligament of dens, longitudinal band of cruciate ligament of atlas vertebra and membrana tectoria, which is the continuation of posterior longitudinal ligament. The wider posterior part of the foramen magnum transmits medulla oblongata, three meninges, the dura, arachnoid and pia mater, anterior spinal artery, right and left posterior spinal arteries, right and left vertebral arteries, right and left spinal accessory nerves, communicating vein between the basilar venous plexus and vertebral venous plexus, sympathetic plexus around the arteries. Many of us think the foramen magnum is transmitting the spinal cord, but it is not. The foramen magnum transmits the medulla oblongata, which is the lowest part of the brainstem, and where it will be continuing as the spinal cord at the lower margin of the foramen magnum. The next foramen in the posterior region of norma basalis is the anterior condylar foramen or hypoglossal canal. These are paired foramen or canal present in front of each occipital condyle. It is situated between the basilar part of occipital bone medially and jugular foramen laterally. It communicates with posterior cranial fossa superiorly and with neck inferiorly. The structures transmitting are hypoglossal nerve, that is 12th cranial nerve, meningeal branch of the ascending pharyngeal artery, emissary vein connecting the sigmoid sinus to the internal jugular vein. Next, the posterior condylar foramen or canal. These are also paired foramen which may be present or may not. If it is present, it is situated behind occipital condyles and superiorly it is communicating with posterior cranial fossa and inferiorly with the neck. The posterior condylar foramen transmits emissary vein connecting the lower end of sigmoid sinus with suboccipital plexus. This is the largest emissary vein of the skull. The next paired foramen and the second largest foramen in the skull after the foramen magnum. It is formed in front of the petrous part of temporal bone and occipital bone behind and lateral to the anterior condylar canal. Superiorly, the jugular foramen communicates with posterior cranial fossa and inferiorly with the neck. Jugular foramen is further divided into three compartments, the anterior, middle and posterior parts. The anterior part of the jugular foramen transmits the inferior petrosal venous sinus, which is a formed and first tributary of the internal jugular vein. Next, the middle part of the jugular foramen transmits three cranial nerves, 9th, the glossopharyngeal, 10th, the vagus and 11th, the accessory cranial nerves. The posterior part of the jugular foramen transmits internal jugular vein, meningeal branch of the occipital artery and the inferior ganglion of the 9th cranial nerve. The next foramen or canaliculus in the posterior region of norma basalis is mastoid canaliculus. It is a minute canal that separates the jugular foramen and the carotid canal. The jugular foramen is marked by the yellow color ring and the carotid canal by a pale brown color. This canaliculus opens inferiorly into the jugular foramen and middle cavity above. This canaliculus is marked by the blue color ring in the picture. The mastoid canalicus transmits two structures. First, the tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal nerve, that is the ninth cranial nerve, or it is also called as Jacobson's nerve. Second, the inferior tympanic artery, which is a branch of ascending pharyngeal artery. Coming to the tympanic canalicus. It is another minute canal situated in the lateral part of jugular foramen, and it is situated lateral to the mastoid canalicus. The tympanic canalicus is marked by the red color ring. The tympanic canalicus transmits the auricular branch of the vagus nerve or the alderman's nerve. Next is the stylomastoid foramen. It is a paired foramen situated between the styloid process medially and mastoid process laterally. The styloid and mastoid process are marked with a white color arrow mark, and in between the two we can see the blue color ring showing the stylomastoid foramen. The stylomastoid foramen transmits two structures. One, the facial nerve, that is the seventh cranial nerve, and second, the stylomastoid artery, which is a branch of posterior auricular artery. The next foramen is mastoid emissary foramen. It is an inconstant foramen which is situated behind the mastoid process of temporal bone or sometimes behind the occipitotemporal suture. This transmits the mastoid emissary vein, which is connecting the sigmoid sinus with the posterior auricular vein, and the posterior meningeal artery, which is a branch of occipital artery. We have discussed almost all the foramina of the norma basalis. I hope all of you would have understood in detail, which will be helpful for your studies. Let us be connected for the upcoming videos. Thank you all.